May 8th, Itenzobai. A Japanese pilot confirms his kill a burning American aircraft carrier, dead in the water. But what if the ghost of that ship came back just 27 days later to decide the most important battle of the war? This is the story of a system that refused to let its warships die. May 8th, Itenzobai. 1,120 hours. The skies above the South Pacific. The stick felt alive in Lieutenant Kenzo Tanaka's hand, the airframe of his Aichi D-3 Aval dive bomber vibrating with the engine's scream. Below him, the American aircraft carrier USS Times, Yorktown Times, was a canvas of chaos. Smoke, black and greasy, poured from her flight deck from a previous bomb hit. Tanaka's target was clear. He pushed the stick forward, the Pacific rushing up to meet him. Anti-aircraft fire stitched the sky around him, a storm of tracers that he flew through with the fatalistic calm of a man who had accepted his role in the Empire's destiny. His focus was absolute release. The 250-kilogram semi-armor-piercing bomb fell away. A perfect drop. He pulled out of the dive, the G-forces pressing him into his seat, his observer confirming the hit a catastrophic explosion near the island in elevator number 2, a geyser of flame and steel that ripped through the flight deck and down into the ship's very bowels. As his squadron regrouped, he circled the dying behemoth. He watched the Times, Yorktown Times, burn, listing heavily, dead in the water, her fires raging out of control. No ship could survive that. Back on the carrier Times, Zuikaku asterisked, the debrief was triumphant. The American carrier was gone. A confirmed kill. Tanaka and his comrades had delivered a death blow. It was a victory, one of many that would surely lead to the Empire's final triumph. What Lieutenant Tanaka witnessed was not a dying ship, but the birth of a problem his entire military culture was unprepared to solve. He saw a tactical victory where he should have seen a strategic catastrophe. For the burning wreck he left behind was not merely an asset to be written off, it was the focal point for a system of resurrection so vast, so efficient, and so alien to the Japanese conception of warfare that it would ultimately render their victories meaningless. The Imperial Japanese Navy was an institution built around the philosophy of times Kessen, times the single, decisive battle. It was an instrument of sharp, fatal blows, designed to annihilate its enemy in a climactic engagement. Its pilots, like Tanaka, were the finely honed tip of this spear, trained to deliver perfection in a single, unrecoverable strike. But the United States Navy was an instrument of war as a protracted industrial enterprise. Its deepest conviction was not that ships wouldn't be hit, but that when they were, they would be saved. Tanaka saw a sinking carrier. He failed to see the web of damage control teams, repair ships, and distant naval yards that had already begun the work of refusing to let it die. He saw the effect, but he never understood the cause. The enemy he was fighting was not a collection of warships, but an entire societal system that viewed naval combat not as a duel, but as a manufacturing problem, where damage was simply a defect to be corrected on a sprawling, oceanic assembly line. December 7th, Itsenzobai Battleship Row, Pearl Harbor. From the perspective of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto and the architects of Operation Z, the attack had been a masterpiece of operational planning, a textbook example of a decisive blow. The mathematics were simple and brutal. 8 American battleships, the heart of the Pacific Fleet, were sunk or crippled. The American fleet was neutralized, but they had made a fundamental miscalculation, one born from a deep-seated philosophical misunderstanding of their enemy. They had confused a battlefield with a factory floor, and a graveyard with a repair depot. In their pursuit of a decisive battle, they had sunk the enemy's capital ships in a 40-foot-deep harbor that was also one of the largest, most advanced naval shipyards in the world. They had delivered a killing blow directly into the emergency room. The day after the attack, The true nature of the American system was revealed. Under the command of Captain Homer N. Wallen, the Pearl Harbor Navy Yard began a salvage operation of a scale the world had never seen. This was not a story of a few heroic men, but of an entire industrial philosophy put into practice. Over 5,000 civilian and military personnel were mobilized into a systematic campaign of resurrection. The work defied belief. Divers spent a cumulative 0.000 hours in the oily, corpse-strewn water, patching colossal holes in sunken hulls with steel plates and immense wooden plugs. An entire forest of Oregon fir was used to construct immense, watertight cofferdams around the damaged sections, allowing them to be pumped dry. The capsized USS Times, Oklahoma Times, was righted in a 6-month engineering feat involving 21 electric winches, anchored to the shore of Ford Island, pulling in perfect, synchronized tension. The USS Times West Virginia Times and USS Times California Asterix, both sitting entirely on the harbor bottom, were refloated, patched, and sent stateside for complete modernization. The numbers told a story that contradicted the very idea of a crippling blow of the 19 vessels sunk or damaged at Pearl Harbor. All but 3, the Times Arizona, Asterisk, Oklahoma, and Times Utah Times, were eventually returned to service. The Japanese had unknowingly conducted the largest naval demolition project in history, only to have it serve as the raw material for the world's greatest industrial salvage operation. Their victory was being systematically deleted by an army of welders and engineers. The systemic disparity became brutally clear less than a month after the Coral Sea. The Japanese carrier, Times, Shokaku Times, had been heavily damaged. She was afloat and her crew had contained the fires. But she required extensive shipyard repairs. The Japanese naval system, with its limited number of dry docks and centralized facilities, meant she would be out of action for months. Her sister ship, Tsuikaku, was undamaged but had lost most of her air group. Replacing the highly trained pilots and aircraft would also take months. Both carriers, 2 of the 6 that had attacked Pearl Harbor, would miss the most important naval battle of the war. The mathematics were inexorable. In contrast, the USS Times, Yorktown Asterisk, with the ship Lieutenant Tanaka had personally sunk, limped into Pearl Harbor on May 27th. Itsenjobai Sishrar, trailing a 10-mile oil slick. A preliminary damage assessment suggested 3 months of repairs at a mainland yard. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, gave the shipyard 72 hours. What followed was the epitome of the American system. 400 shipyard workers swarmed the Times, Yorktown, Times the moment she was settled into dry dock number 1. They did not perform a perfect repair, they performed a sufficient one. A concept antithetical to the Japanese pursuit of martial perfection. They worked around the clock, under immense floodlight, their welding arcs turning night into day. They did not replace the destroyed structural frames below the flight deck. They cut them out and welded in a lattice of steel I-beams. The hull was patched, not rebuilt. Entire electrical systems were jury-rigged. It was ugly, pragmatic, and brutally effective. 3 days later, the Times, Yorktown Times, sailed to join the fleet at Midway. Her decks crowded with replacement aircraft from the crippled USS Times, Saratoga Asterisk. There, her planes would play a pivotal role in sinking the Japanese carriers Times Soru Asterisk and Times Hiru Asterisk. The Japanese Navy, fixated on the perfection of its warrior class and the elegance of its warships, was being defeated by a nation of welders and engineers who understood that in a war of attrition, a speed of repair was a more powerful weapon than a perfectly executed torpedo run. This principle was scaled across the Pacific. At forward bases like Ulithi Atoll, entire floating shipyards, complete with massive auxiliary repair docks, the ARDs serviced the fleet thousands of miles from home. performing repairs that the Japanese could only accomplish by sending a ship on a 3-week journey back to the home islands. The unseen weapon was logistics. The American system didn't just build ships, it built a mobile, resilient network that refused to let them stay broken. March 19th, Iten Jobai Sishiru, 0708 hours, 50 miles off the coast of Japan. The flight deck of the USS Times, Franklin Asterisk, an Essex-class carrier, was a scene of controlled, high-tempo activity. Aircraft were being armed and fueled for a strike on the Japanese mainland. Suddenly, a single Japanese dive bomber emerged from the low cloud cover. 2 semi-armor-piercing bombs struck the carrier in quick succession. The result was an inferno that naval warfare experts of any nation would have deemed fatal. Her flight deck was a twisted landscape of fire. Secondary explosions ripped through her hangar deck, which was packed with 31 armed and fueled aircraft, turning it into a blast furnace. Within minutes, 724 of her crew were dead or dying. She was dead in the water, listing 13 degrees to starboard, her crew fighting a losing battle against a sea of burning aviation fuel. A Japanese communique triumphantly and logically reported her sunk, but the Times, Franklin Times, did not sink. What saved her was not a miracle, but the full expression of the American system concentrated into a single burning hole. It began with the ship's design, the redundant system, the compartmentalization, the armored flight deck that, while pierced, contained much of the initial blast. It continued with the damage control training that had been drilled into every sailor, transforming them from specialists into a single, unified organism of survival. It was galvanized by the heroic efforts of men like the ship's chaplain, Lieutenant Commander Joseph T. O'Callaghan, who, armed with a fire hose, organized firefighting parties in the face of certain death. But it was anchored by a core belief that no asset was disposable. The cruiser, USS Times Pittsburgh Times, came alongside and attached a tow line, pulling the crippled giant away from the enemy coast. For 2 days, the remaining crew fought the fires. They jettisoned unstable bombs, cooled burning magazines with seawater, and slowly, methodically, reclaimed their ship from the inferno. The Times, Franklin Times, sailed 12,000 miles back to the Brooklyn Navy Yard under her own power. She was the most heavily damaged U.S. warship to survive the war, a vessel that had absorbed more punishment than the ships sunk at Pearl Harbor. She became a legend, the ship that wouldn't die, a steel embodiment of an entire philosophy of resilience that the enemy could inflict wounds upon, but could not kill. The psychological impact of this system on the Japanese was devastating. A pilot or submariner would risk his life to attack the American fleet. He would see the explosions, the fires, the oil slicks. He would return a hero, his victory confirmed in after-action reports and celebrated with sake. Then, months later, during another sortie, he would see the same ship, identified by the same hull number, launching aircraft against him. The feeling was one of utter futility. A profound, soul-crushing demoralization set in. Their sacrifices were being erased by an invisible, inexhaustible enemy working in distant harbors. The hunter had struck a fatal blow, only to find the prey was a ghost that refused to acknowledge its own death. Each resurrected American warship was a testament not just to the enemy's industrial might, but to the complete invalidation of their own martial philosophy. In the end, the War for the Pacific was a contest between two fundamentally different ideas of what a navy was for. The Imperial Japanese Navy had built a magnificent weapon, a finely crafted blade designed to deliver a single, perfect, killing blow in a decisive battle. The Americans built a sprawling, messy, and infinitely resilient industrial ecosystem designed to absorb any blow and keep fighting. The Japanese saw the war as a duel between samurai, a contest of spirit and martial prowess. The Americans treated it as a problem of mass production and systems management. The resurrection engineers, the divers of Pearl Harbor, the welders who patched the Times, Yorktown asterisked, the Seabees who built the forward bases, and the damage control teams who refused to abandon the Times. Franklin Times proved that modern war is won not by the side that is most skilled at destroying, but by the side that is most proficient at rebuilding. The final verdict of the war came not from the thunder of naval guns, but from the relentless 2 4-hour-a-day shriek of the grinders and the blinding arc of the welding torch, systematically annulling every Japanese victory, one repaired hull at a time. The ultimate lesson of the Pacific War is written not in the accounts of its great sea battles, but in the dry dock logs and shipyard production schedules. It's a stark reminder that modern warfare is a contest of systems, where the ability to resurrect a crippled asset can be more decisive than the skill to deliver a killing blow. The true weapon was not a single warship, but the entire industrial ecosystem that refused to let it die. What other unseen systems do you believe truly determined the outcome of the war? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this analysis compelling, don't forget to subscribe to Content Channel and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the forces that shape history. Thank you for watching Content Channel.